Are you making some major canning mistakes that could be potentially deadly? Let's go over my top 10 list and check them off. Hi, everyone, and welcome to SuttonsDaze. If you're new here, my name is Lisa, and we are all about pantry preparedness, all about making sure that you have what you need in case of an emergency. Today, we're going to go over the top 10 most potentially dangerous canning mistakes that you can make. Let's get started. Number 1 is making up your own canning recipe. Without the scientific testing, you don't know how long that needs to be processed to make it safe. Now, that doesn't go for, all things. That goes for some things. You can do soup as long as you do it by their guidelines, okay? You can do meat as long as you do it by their guidelines. Meaning you can add in flavoring. I don't always recommend it. I almost never recommend it, but it's not for safety reasons. It's for taste reasons. Making up your own jam recipes per se. You don't know if the pH level in those is adequate based on your made up recipe. It's something that needs to be tested. It's something that needs to be safe in order to put up on your shelves or to sell to people. Can you imagine selling something to somebody that makes them sick? Number 2 is adding a starch or a thickening agent to your canned goods, unless it's called for, unless it's what's been tested. Thickening agents slow the heat penetration to the center of the jar. And by doing that, you are changing the all-around time for canning. So it doesn't get to the temperature that it needs in the center of the jar, in the center of the product, if it's having to fight its way through a thickener. That makes it unsafe. Have you ever wanted to add extra onions or peppers or anything like that to what you've canned? It's a big no-no. Adding those extra vegetables actually dilutes the acidity. It's hard to believe, but it does. It dilutes the acidity, which changes that whole scientific factor again. So you don't, oh, I really like peppers, so I'm going to put in twice the amount that they say I can. No, because it's been tested for the amount that they say. By adding more, you change the overall acidity in that product, and that time may not work anymore. Using an oven to can. There is no such thing as oven canning because dry heat acts differently than wet heat. I don't know. How much simpler can I say that? So the wet heat, they know for the time that they've tested, permeates that jar, okay? Permeates the contents, gets all the way to the center. Life is good. Dry heat acts completely different. Now, in addition to that, canning jars are not made for dry heat. They can explode. You can totally compromise those jars, at which point not only have you lost food and jars, but money and time. And you've got a heck of a mess to clean up. There's no safe way to oven can anything. Altitude is your friend. Altitude is your friend. Know your altitude. We just had a really great question on Monday Night Live where somebody said, does my altitude change if I'm in a high-rise apartment? Epic question. Epic question. And I asked them to contact the National Center for Home Food Preservation because I can't answer that. I'm going to assume it does, but I can't answer that, right? Because the elevation that they're giving you is ground level, right? So I know that I'm at 1,000 feet where I'm at. But if I go, 10 miles one way, 20 miles the other way, my elevation changes a little bit. So you need to pay attention to your elevation because it does impact how the entire process happens. Let me read you exactly what it says. Since boiling water temperatures are lower at higher altitudes, say what? The products will be under-processed. Pressure canning requires adding more pounds of pressure, while water bath canning requires more processing time. Altitude, very, very important. I forgot to vent my pressure canner. Start over. Venting that pressure canner is extremely important in the equation, okay? Because when you put the water in, the jars in, put the lid on, turn the heat up, there's still a lot of air in there, right? And what you're doing when you're canning is you're pressurizing it. It's being canned under pressure, and it cannot get to the proper pressure with all of that extra air in the canner. You must vent that 10 minutes, that steady stream of steam that I'm always talking about, to get all of that air out of the canner. Very important step. Oh, tomatoes. Tomatoes, 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 tomatoes. Tomatoes, if you're not acidifying your tomatoes, you are creating a potentially deadly situation. Tomatoes today are not the same as tomatoes 50 years ago. I don't care what your mom and your grandma did or anybody else, okay? I can't even speak to heritage breeds because the consumer as a whole has told the industry that we don't want acidic tomatoes. We want sweet tomatoes. So they have been purposely breeding the acidity out of the tomatoes for generations now. You must add acid, either lemon juice or citric acid, to the tomatoes when you can them, whether it be water bath or pressure canned. You need to do it. Just do it. This is something I seriously did not know people even did. This is terrifying. Cooling a pressure canner under running water. What? Okay, first, don't move that pressure canner. Leave it sit where it's at. Don't move that pressure canner when it's full of jars. Calculations as to the processing time are important. They're very important. They have not only factored in the venting, they have factored in the entire time that it comes up to pressure and the entire time that it comes down as part of the processing time. By speeding up that depressurizing phase by either putting the canner under running water, goodness forbid, or taking the regulator off and letting the steam out fast, it totally negates the canning time. Completely, okay? Don't do it. Let it come down on its own. Everybody breathe. Heat curves. Did you know there's such a thing as a heat curve? There is. So when your processing time tells you, if you're hot packing, that you're taking the hot food into the hot jar with the hot liquid, putting it into the hot canner, that's all part of the process, right? That's part of the heat curve. Now, if you do, or if you're filling your jars and doing this and doing that, and you let them cool down, they were meant to be hot pack, but you let them cool down before you put them into the canner, then you have messed with the calculations. Quite simply put, it could be underprocessed because it was calculated to go in there hot. Underprocessed meat, vegetables, fruits can cause botulism. Have we talked about botulism? These are just the top 10 most dangerous canning practices. So I hope that this helps you in your canning practice. I hope that this helps you along your journey. Canning is great. It's fun, it's rewarding, and it helps you build up security, the best insurance that money can buy. But only if it's done right. Otherwise, you're playing Russian roulette. I've put together a playlist, it's right up here, with all of our frequently asked questions. I hope that you'll take a look at them. There's some good stuff in there. Until next time, everybody, be safe.